Hi, I'm Kerrin McCadden, and you're listening to Time to Connect.
Kerrin McCadden, thank you so much for taking the time to connect. I really appreciate it.
It's really nice to see you, John. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here.
You bet. Really looking forward to this conversation. You're in Vermont, I bet.
That is correct. I'm in South Burlington.
Have you lived in Vermont your whole life?
No, I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts, and I came to Vermont to go to college, and I never left. And so I've been here a very long time. But to the people here, I will always be considered a flatlander.
Okay.
That's the term for people like me who came in and never left. So.
Yeah. I was through Vermont a couple of years ago, and oh my God, it's so pretty. It's so beautiful. And we're dealing down here in Texas still with hot weather, even in mid-November. I'm sure you have glorious weather right now there.
It has been incredibly beautiful, and that's not always something we can say, but it's been just a glorious late summer, early fall. Yeah.
Nice.
I do have my gloves out though, and my ice scraper, so we're already into that season.
I'm jealous. I would love to have my gloves and ice scraper out.
Mhm.
But anyway, we are planning a trip up to the Catskills for Thanksgiving week next week, which I'm really looking forward to, get away from
Great.
this Texas heat. Well, listen, Kerrin, again, thank you so much for doing this. And I will put links in the show notes so people can find out more about you. But if you don't mind, maybe we can just start with a little bit of a biography, just tell people who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Who am I and how did I get here today? Um, I've always been a kid who didn't like to follow the rules. And I don't mean in a troublemaking kind of way, but I was really attracted to poetry as a kid, um, as soon as I discovered it. And it really spoke to me in terms of another possibility for how language could work. I wasn't a stellar student in school and came to really love literature and went to college up here in Vermont, came to Vermont to go to school. I went to St. Michael's College and studied literature and became a teacher because I didn't know how else to be around people who were talking about reading and writing all the time. My family is an immigrant family. My grandparents came over from Ireland, and we weren't really surrounded by literature, or with the public library was a big part of my life. So, sort of discovering literature by accident set me where I am now. So,
Mhm.
I think that's sort of a good literary quick biography.
Yeah, there's a lot in there that I want to ask you about. We're definitely going to get into your fascinating history with Ireland and your kind of discovery of your roots later on in life. And now, so you said as a child, or I don't know if you said child, but when you were younger, you discovered poetry pretty early. It's interesting, as you know, I talked to Jane Hirschfield recently, and she recalls that the first book she bought when she was a child and she was given money to buy a book, she bought a book of haiku, which is really remarkable for a child. How early are we talking with you that you said you kind of resonated with poetry?
I wouldn't say that early. Actually, it's probably it's really funny. We're going to talk about music at some point too, I'm sure. But I don't do a very good job of hearing lyrics when I listen to music. But I did sort of discover poetry by reading liner notes on albums when I was babysitting as a young teenager. And I found the way that language was moving in lyrics really, really beautiful. And I spent a lot of time copying them out. Maybe babysitting, get the kids to bed and copying lyrics. I still have the notebook I kept. But the first book of poetry that really got me going on like, oh gosh, what is this? Can I do this too? Was my mother went to the church bookstore, like a church sale, and bought me a book called The New American Poets, 1945 to 1960. And that's all the beat poets. And I was in high school. And the renegade, rebellious language and use of language was just so exciting to me. So
Yeah.
really, I would say high school and finding that book. And then like Yevgeny Yevtushenko, I loved his work. I found it was always finding a book in a place where I was like, it wasn't a purposeful hunt. It was, oh, this book looks interesting. It's poetry. What's in it?
Uh-huh.
French poetry. I was a student of French, Paul Éluard. So I would find these kind of oddball books and study them.
Hmm. And I'm sure maybe we can get into this when we start talking about Ireland a little bit, but did you get into the Irish poets as well?
Not early, not early on, but later, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see, what do I want to ask you next? Because I've got so much here that I want to ask you about. Definitely we want to talk about music and your comment about not, it intrigues me that you don't listen to lyrics as much, but I'm as a songwriter myself, and but I'm also really impressed that as a young person you were writing down those lyrics from the liner notes. I think that's super cool.
And
Um,
just to clarify, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like I don't hear them. It's not that I'm not looking for them. I don't process them well. I just don't under I don't under I listen to the sound of the music more and I can't pick out what the words are saying. It's more of
do,
like an auditory processing thing.
do you sing at all?
Not well, no.
Okay. Sing along with the radio at all, kind of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
You know, some of my favorite, eh, I'm going to admit something similar to what you're saying. Some of my favorite musicians, I can kind of sing along, but I don't know. I don't, I really, it's almost just like sound,
Yeah,
but, but not all of them, anyway. Okay, cool. And you are teaching high school
that's
still?
correct. Yep.
I definitely want to ask you about this. My wife is a retired elementary school teacher. I taught at the university for many years, and one of the things I want to ask you about, I can't imagine what it's like teaching now with chat GPT and AI, and kids don't read anymore, it seems like. What are you facing here with respect to these challenges?
Well, yes. I mean, all of that. I taught forever in a public school, a public high school in Montpelier in the capital. And that was a literature-based curriculum. And I was there for 28 years. So I started teaching before kids had computers to type on. So I've seen it all. Now I teach in a technical high school. So I teach in trades programs. And so because we're a technical high school, we do not shy away from tech and AI is tech. So the questions are more, how do we use it ethically? What is it a tool for? And it's a really powerful literacy tool for students who struggle with literacy skills.
Hmm.
It can be, I mean, I think on one end in the university level, it feels like it is a threat to originality. In a population that struggles more with literacy skills, it's a gate crasher. You can write a more literate email if you use ChatGPT. You can access different levels of society if you can write well. And it can be a power tool. So we're trying to wrestle with how do we use it ethically and what
Yeah,
does it do for our students?
yeah. It amuses me how people who I know, I'll just say family members, when you
Mhm.
see some of their posts on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, and you say to yourself, you didn't write that. You didn't write that. Have you tried, if you have not tried this, I encourage you to try it. Have you tried to ask the AI to write a poem in your voice?
My cousin did. My cousin works in AI in Dublin, and
Yeah.
he made a video of me reciting a poem that I wrote that was not, and it was really disturbing
Yeah.
because it wasn't entirely wrong about some of the moves I would make, but the poem had no like center to it. It had no urge or
Yeah.
core.
Yeah. Yeah, this stuff has not really passed the Turing test yet because it tends to be sometimes too perfect and it doesn't get certain things, but it's really it's certainly interesting. God knows where it's going. I think every generation gets scared of the coming technology, but this does feel different.
It's
Uh,
a very big calculator. A
okay, it's a really big one. Yeah.
really big calculator.
How old were you when you first used the words "I am a poet"?
Wow, that is a big question. I didn't publish my first poem until I turned 40.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It was a big, I had been writing my whole life and I had been writing sort of in quiet, I guess I would say. And it was a very big practice in my life, but I never did any publishing. And I made a goal that I would publish my first poem when I turned 40. And I also wanted to march in a bagpiping band, which I didn't do, but I did do the poetry thing.
Okay.
And I I think it was in my early 40s where I was able to say that because I was not only practicing but participating in the world of publishing. I think for me it was when I was I would have said earlier I write poetry, but to say I am a poet was something that probably came in my early 40s.
Mm.
Yeah.
Made me think of Emily Dickinson there for a minute, writing away without people knowing. Did you
Well,
have
and
quite a few poems written before you published?
yeah, and I don't think any of them were publishable.
Ah,
Um, I think I was practicing and tinkering and figuring things out, and I wasn't able to access any kind of places where I could study or work with people. And once I started working with people, I don't want to say it was a quick thing, but the toggles, moved into place. Um, yeah. I think when a lot of women who are raising families, and maybe in not the most supportive environments, you'll see a lot of women talking about publishing their first books after 40, really finding time to make the practice happen when they either have the emotional and practical space to do the work or whether they're when their children are grown.
some people don't like this question, but I'm going to ask it, and hopefully you won't mind it. Who are who are some of the poets who have had the most profound impact on you? Who do you kind of name check that you know had a big impact on you?
Yeah, Bridget Pegeen Kelly.
Yeah,
Her work has a lushness to it and a density to it that I find really just stunning and moving.
there's something
Um,
about her that is really hard to describe, but it's when I read her poems, it's you're in the presence of something for sure.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. And I'm a very fickle reader. I like to read all over the place, and I love to read first books. I like to read someone's first collection. I like to find someone I haven't read before. So recently, I've enjoyed reading James Tate. I think James Tate is a strange and funny poet, and I enjoy the edginess of his humor and his imagination. Reading, what am I reading right now? There's a pile over here. I love the work of Matthew Lipman, who's a dear friend, and we write together a lot, so I like to get inside his head. Um, yeah, that's a good start, probably.
yeah. Now this really might be unfair, and forgive me if it is, but if
Go
I
for it.
just throw a few poets' names out at you, I'm not asking you to rate them or something, but just say kind of what you think about when you think about this poet,
Can I like do like a bar system? No,
however you want to do it.
no, no, no. Okay, kidding.
Billy Collins.
Um, really funny. Needs to go take a walk is a funny joke I've heard people say. Get outside. I think that he is delightful.
Yeah, me too. Elizabeth Bishop.
Yes, she's
Okay,
just
she's
she's
cool.
just she's just a genius.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. Wallace Stevens.
Uh, Inscrutable
Yeah,
and elegant.
yeah. Let's see. Well, let's do one or two more. William Carlos Williams.
He's just a real seer, a seer. I think his work is really important to me.
Bukowski.
I have liked reading some of his prose. I don't really like his poetry that much. Is this
Yeah.
what I'm doing? I'm telling you whether I like it or not. I think
It's
it's fine.
okay. No, it's
But
okay because he's one guy that I that doesn't surprise me.
yeah, it's also really hyper masculine,
Yeah, it is. It is for sure.
which is
Seamus,
fine. That's who he is. That's fine.
yeah, Seamus Heaney.
Yes, I find Seamus Heaney to be so inventive, and I think that kind of density I was talking about with Bridget Piggin Kelly, the sort of lush, the link you can't predict what the words are going to be, but once they land, you just feel like that is the perfect word, and the words are never like meant to be highbrow, but the use of them is just it's it makes my brain feel like it's leapt somewhere.
Nice, nice.
Mm.
I actually got to meet him once, and it was so intimidating. I felt like I was meeting a rock star or something.
Yeah, you kind of were.
Okay. You've been such a good sport, so I'm going to keep pushing on the questions that you may not like.
Good.
What would you like someone to say about you if someone had that kind of short response? What would you hope people would say about Kerrin McCadden's poems?
Oh, that is such not a fair question.
Okay. Yeah,
No,
let's
no,
pass
no,
on
but
that one.
let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay.
I
Okay.
I think I would like someone to say, um, maybe that I had said something that they wish that they had said,
Ah.
or um, maybe, God, maybe something like, well, that was weird,
Mhm,
but I had a new thought.
mhm.
I'd like to be able to help people think something new or look at something a different way. Recently, I had a poem online, and someone said, "This is something I've never thought about, and now I'm thinking about it a lot." That made me really happy.
Nice. Which reminds me of trying to think of his name. The poet. He was the poet laureate for several years. Famously Buddhist. Wrote a poem called W.S. Merwin wrote a
Hmm.
poem called "For the Anniversary of My Death." Do you know that poem?
You're gonna have to remind me. I feel
The,
like I
the,
do.
the idea is every year I pass the anniversary of my death, the date that I'm going to die, without knowing. And I had that exactly what you're saying. I'd never thought of that. Wow.
Yes.
How interesting. Where are you with respect to if we think about the average person, especially since you teach younger people, this might be an interesting question for you. A lot of people have a negative adverse reaction to poetry and they think, well, I need to understand it the way I understand prose, or it's just why do they have to talk that way? Or, and we can say, like Billy Collins mentioned earlier, very, very rarely, although I think there's a lot more to his poetry than a lot of people realize, but it's pretty straightforward. You read a Billy Collins poem and it's there on the page, you get it. You don't have that moment of going, what in the heck does that mean? And then you read someone, we maybe won't name someone who it's just, well, Stevens, inscrutable. You're just not sure. You've really got to work hard at it. And I know that you're not all the way over here because I know a lot of your stuff. You want people to work at it a little bit, but I have this feeling you also don't want people to feel that you've obfuscated. Where are you in that spectrum? How do you feel about that?
In terms of my own work, or in terms of my opinion about,
Your
yeah,
work.
um, I don't ever want to confuse somebody entirely, but I
Mhm.
do regularly want to surprise them.
Yeah,
And
beautiful.
I think that surprise, just like with humor, I love humor, and I love to think about humor, and I appreciate my own sense of humor and the senses of humor of others. And I think humor and poetry are very closely related in terms of their reliance on surprise. And I know that when I'm writing and I land on a surprise that is for, like, as I write, sometimes the surprises are for me too, as I'm
Mhm,
composing a piece.
mhm.
But I am delighted by that, and I want to have that be an experience other people have too.
Great answer. Uh, well, I first became aware of you with your poem American Wake, as I suspect a lot of people did. And I asked you in our correspondence if you wouldn't mind reading it, but I think I said if you're not completely tired of reading it or talking
No,
about
it's fine. It's
it.
fine.
And that also, I think that poem, if you'll read that, and then we can talk a little bit about it, it will help get us also into a little more of your bio and your interesting later in life discovery of Ireland.
Sure.
Okay,
All
let's do
right.
it. Let's do it.
So this poem begins with an epigraph, and it's a couple of lines from a song about the emigrant experience, people leaving Ireland. And the lyrics are, "The land is too small to serve all, and we must cross the sea." American Wake. Hold awake for the living, the leaving. Stop the clocks and turn the mirrors. Tell stories, smoke and eat and drink. It was never a question of whether they'd leave, but when. Play games to pass the time, not to check that the dead are dead, but to lift a lesser God. Tell what you've heard about the new world. Later, all you will be able to tell is what you remember. Let the keener loose on the night. Let the house wail. Sing the songs. Let pipes keep evil at bay. Square off with your child and dance. Let the neighbors whose baby was born with the call lend it, a charm against drowning. Give dry cakes for the passage, a box of eggs. Roast frogs, grind them to a powder, and bake into bread to safeguard against fever. Take no shortcuts to the dock. This is it. The bees will tell the other world who's gone.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Tell me about the bees.
This is a folkloric tradition of when something big happens, like a death or a loss, that you're supposed to tell the bees. I think when the Queen of England died, they told the bees, like, you're supposed to tell the bees.
Mm.
And I just think that that is a stunning and beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Like, who gets the news? Oh, the bees. The bees need to know.
Nice. And I've heard you talk about this poem several times, and I hate to have you repeat yourself, but tell people a little bit about this. First of all, what an American Wake is, and how this connects maybe to your own. And I know this could be a 45-minute conversation, so hit it high level and just give us a sense of what's behind this poem and also how it relates to your own life.
Yeah. So the American Wake would have been when people were leaving Ireland. So my grandparents left in 1920 to come over. They were 20 years old. They were both born in 1900. And they, when you were leaving for America, you would never come back home because you couldn't fly home. There weren't airplanes to take you back home, and that you weren't going to get back on a boat and come back to Ireland. The point was that you were leaving. And so the people left behind knew that they would never see that person again. So they would have a wake. In some places in Ireland, they called it a convoy, but you would have an actual wake for the person, and they would be at their own wake, and they would be celebrated, and people would weep and cry, and you would have an actual wake for the living person. And then the Irish wakes, just like Irish weddings, go all night long. So in the morning, everybody would walk the person to the dock, and that was
Incredible.
it.
Just
It's just
incredible.
just to slow it down for me, writing this poem and slowing it down and thinking about it in real time was just, it's really sad. It's just really, really sad that, now we can travel back and forth, we can go visit, but
Yeah. And you have another poem, it's probably in this same book, and I'm blanking on what it is. I'm just seeing an image of someone standing up to their waist in water.
yeah. Yeah, it's called In the Harbor. And that's based, I wrote that poem based off a sketch. There's a drawing of people in the water. And they go out, they go as far out as they can
To
toward the
say
ship.
goodbye.
Say goodbye. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, thank you for that. How does that, it's a good segue into you sort of finding out pretty late in life about your past in Ireland or your heritage there. Talk about that a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, well, I always knew, like, I grew up with my grandparents, right? So we saw them, weekly, and they had this wonderful accent. You know, they never lost their accents, and I was always asking my grandmother, and she would just tell me to be quiet. You know, oh, wisht your brother, she'd say. And we weren't supposed to know anything about it. And I think they really wanted us to be Americans. They just wanted us to be, well, this is, you know, we're here now, and this is what you're doing. And so there was no connection to anybody. There was some notion that in Ireland there was a farm or there were people, but we had no idea. And so for me, it was when the internet was invented. I have a strange last name. Nobody, you know, anybody I've met with my last name is my cousin. So I Googled McCadden and I emailed a guy back. I think I used Dogpile. I think it was like way back in the beginning or some like weird browser I'm
Mhm.
remembering. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm your cousin." And he said, "Let me get you in touch with this other guy. He knows more about our family." And then his name is Michael Mulligan, and he came over to visit with his sister. And that was first contact. And then
What year would that have been?
uh 1990, my daughter was 3, 1998.
Okay. So 20, a little over 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And how
And
many times have you been to Ireland since?
I want to say 4, but I didn't go then. I didn't go, my
Okay.
first time over was 2010 because his sister invited me and my family to her wedding. And that was our first time we went.
Do you correspond with your relatives over there to this day?
Yeah, yeah, I do.
Nice.
And I inveigled myself into staying on my grandfather's farm. My poor cousin, my father's first cousin, has a farm in Donegal, and it's my grandfather's farm that he now runs. So I've been able to stay on the family land. And and they've been lovely. People have been, you know, I'm this strange person who asks 1,000 questions, but they've always been really, really loving and really welcoming.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
really fun. Really
by
fun.
the way, I wore this shirt today in honor of you.
Oh,
Uh,
how nice.
my nephew, uh, who lives in Kansas City, is his father, my brother-in-law, is full-blooded Irish, and so he's half, I guess, half Irish, and he plays in this Irish band called the Elders,
It's a good
and
name.
they um, they tour Ireland every year.
Hmm.
They sell out big places here. They're doing great, and I'm so proud of him. It's such a happy music,
That's awesome.
so much fun. Um, well, that's really cool, and I know that you have evolved as a poet, and you've sort of changed a little bit, and you grace the cover of this American Poetry Review,
Who's that? Yes.
and the title of the piece for you in here is Time and Other Poems. Time is a really long poem, uh, and I'm happy to have you read the whole thing if you want to, or read one of the other another newer poem, and then maybe let's talk about how this shows some evolution in your writing.
Sure. Yeah, it's a long poem. Buckle up, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Okay, let me find it. Um,
While you're looking, let me ask you another question.
okay.
Do you I'm assuming that these other poems are going to make their way into a book soon. Do you have
Mhm.
something? Do you have something already at the publisher? Do you have a date, or is it still in the
No,
works?
it's still in the works. So it's got a title. It's called Let's Never Leave. And it's built of, I started thinking of each book I've written, I've kicked poems out of them for being like too funny. The tone is too like off the cuff, not serious enough, not in service of anything. And yet I love writing these kinds of poems. And so I decided to collect them together and let them inform some newer work.
Nice.
Um, and I can talk more about that later, but I'm interested in, um, I think every book is an opportunity to pursue a new direction.
Yeah,
So
fair enough.
I'll read this and then we can talk about that.
Okay.
I'm going to change my glasses so I can see what I'm doing.
And I'll put mine on so I can read along with you. I like to see I like orality, but I also like looking at it on the page while I hear the poem.
Yeah, I agree. Time. Isn't it annoying how you can read all you want about the past, but not go there? Collect whatever you want from back then, whenever, put it on a shelf. You can even decide you like a time period, hit up eBay or Craigslist, and in no time you can have almost whatever you want. That's it though. Like you can't go hang out and get to know your Neanderthal forebears, the 2% of you that supposedly makes it difficult for you to get rid of the things you don't need. No lunch with that guy in his cave. No family reunion among the pelts and skins. No gazing at their pigmented handprint cave art by hearthlight, or chewing the fat about the latest hunt. You'll never get to ask what he saved from his ancestors, or whether they believed a person stays connected to their things like your family does. A rocking chair, a stand-in for a grandmother. You can read all you want about revolutions and ships at sea and suffering, and even about how babies were born before modern medicine, or about how people brushed their teeth and stayed warm, but nothing about what they wondered, nothing about any one regular person's worries, not how they liked to fall asleep, or what they thought, really, about the prevailing ideas of the time. I keep all sorts of things I want to tell my guy in the cave. I hold on to my great-grandmother's complete works of Robert Burns, for one thing. I found a clue in it just today, a newspaper clipping I had missed the last time I thumbed through it, bookmarking the story of Highland Mary. There is nothing like a sad story, right? They were days away from being married, so deeply in love. Guy in the cave, 2000th great-grandfather. What was love, really? Did you know what married is? I read that you knew about loss, that's for sure. Recently, we learned you buried your people with flowers. That's how we first learned you were more than ugh, ugh, ooga, ooga, and grabbing women by the hair and clubbing each other all day long. It was household hints she used as a bookmark. So there was a day then when she was thinking about at least one of these things: homemade cologne, mending a kid glove, using soap tree bark for removing spots from men's clothing, tar soap shampoo with a borax rinse, best ways to sweeten preserves and sauces, folding a dress skirt right side out to minimize wrinkles, splashing the face with water and benzoin tincture to whiten the skin and prevent wrinkles, dusting a coat before hanging it up, or adding a teaspoon of the best whiskey to a cup of beef tea to stimulate an invalid. I can have no idea what you thought about, though, way before you were diluted down to 2% of me, or maybe some percentage of her in her household, where I drank tea in a tiny cup in a tiny pink rocking chair, way before she went blind and broke her hip, way before also the bookmark and the pencil marks on Cotter's Saturday Night, sections 1, 9, 10, 14, 15, each marked with a little oval O. This is all I've got, though. No time portal to hop back through time to know anything more, as I keep saying. No way around being the time I'm in, sitting here, not knowing all the things I can't know. Strange to live in a world full of facts and information and alternative facts, post-truth even, but still have no way of ever knowing. So many minds, quiet moments lost forever. And me just sitting here looking at a peat brick from the farm that isn't ours anymore, a cuckoo clock, 3 generations of serving bowls, my grandfather's hammer, and on, married to a man who came to me with a moth-eaten kilt, lead toy soldiers, a tiny sailboat in a box, and an assassin's cane, and on, and me, like a fool, imagining a piece of me will last.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I love the guy in the cave. That's definitely a different voice than we encounter in this book, for
Yes,
sure.
yes.
Um, Did you, did your husband really come to you with a moth-eaten kilt?
Yeah, and an assassin's cane.
Wow.
He's got some great artifacts. He's got some interesting things he's collected through his life. We both have, these things we've collected through our family that, yeah.
So he's Scottish?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Well, what what can you tell us about this poem?
Um, I that's a great question. You know what sort of opened up this poem is this idea of the Neanderthal.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
scientifically, they're called Neanderthals. That's how we pronounce it. But like common people pronounce it Neanderthal. So I'm just going to say it
right.
like that.
Yeah,
I read a book about Neanderthals by the wonderful British scientist Rebecca Raggs Sykes. It's called Kindred, and it's an extraordinarily beautiful scientific book
okay.
about everything we know about this kind of humanoid that she studies almost exclusively. And it just captured my imagination when I realized I also had Neanderthal DNA. We do these DNA tests. So that kind of opened it up for me. And I became really obsessed with Neanderthals. And I became the person at the dinner party who would only talk about them. Like, did you know? Um, and I even took myself on a research mission to France to visit Neanderthal sites
Wow.
in
You really
April.
did get into it.
I re I really dug in.
Yeah,
And I still am. I'm writing about it. I'm trying to figure out how to, why I care about it so much. And I think it's about this notion of time, and getting older and in wondering, um, it sounds so cliche, but the meaning of being alive, who are we?
yeah,
And coming to this place of feeling like a life is beautifully small. We're in it, we feel like it's this massive thing, and we feel like we're just like collecting things and
yes,
we're doing things, and our days are we have purpose, but
yeah.
like it's really so small.
It's so small.
And I'm falling in love with that idea.
Nice.
So I think thinking about time and my family has always kept things. That's your grandmother's this, that's your grandfather's that, as these touchstones of lives. And I don't think they ever expected that I was going to keep the rocking chair forever. I
Hmm.
think they bought a rocking chair because they needed a chair.
Hmm.
Yeah, but we imbue objects with all this meaning, because we're meaning making people. And I think I'm starting to let go of that a little bit. And I
You know,
wish I could know instead what they thought about every day.
uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, that, by the way, the poem, one of the things it made me think of is Howard Zinn and his approach to history.
Mm,
Let's also look at the common man here. Let's not just look at the big moments.
right. I love that book. His
Yeah.
his
Um, okay, well, let's see. Um, let's talk about musical just a little bit.
Okay.
Because most, probably out of the first 50 or 60 episodes I had of this, they were mostly singer-songwriters or musicians, and that's kind of how it started off. And I'm really pleased to have branched off and uh, talking to poets and novelists and other folks. And but I do kind of want to stick with the music theme a little bit. And we have started talking about just a bit, but who are some of the folks that you remember listening to growing up?
I um I was afraid you were going to ask me that. I think my taste in music is in my mouth. Like I just don't think I have great taste in music, but I deeply love now listening to the terrible sappy music from the 70s that I grew up with.
Like Air Supply, that kind of stuff.
Not them. No.
Okay.
But
Well,
yes,
you
yes,
said
yes.
sappy.
No, 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 I know. Yes.
Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, Fleetwood Mac. I love Fleetwood Mac,
Yeah.
and as a young kid, I loved Bread, like these sappy love songs, I
Yeah.
loved that stuff.
Carpenter.
I have an odd fondness for, I like, I object to many of his lyrics, speaking of lyrics, but I am fond of Neil Diamond, which is like a real kind of embarrassment for me. It's not, why did I say it's embarrassing? I think
I don't
he's
know.
considered like so corny, you know, like in my generation, he's considered so corny.
But I
But
got to tell you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I got to tell you, Neil Diamond was cool when he was young. He's
yeah, that's
kind of like
true.
Elvis, kind of like Elvis. You know, when Elvis was young, he was just cool, and then he got into the older, the fat Elvis Vegas phase where he became kind of a caricature of himself. Neil
Yeah.
Diamond didn't progress in exactly the same way, but a lot of people who didn't know the early Neil Diamond would be surprised how cool he really was.
Okay, that's really comforting to me.
Yeah.
I also really love disco and funk
Did you? Okay.
a lot when I was younger, yeah. Um, and whatever was on the radio, because we didn't have any technology. I had a record player. So I had, you know, my first albums were, what did I buy? I went the Columbia Record Club thing that they all took us for
Yes.
a ride, you know.
You
I
still
bought,
owe them some money, probably, by the way.
oh yeah, my dad wrote them a letter. Like, you leave her alone. She's 16.
That's funny.
Um, I bought the Kinks in excess, the
Mm,
Talking Heads. I
yeah.
also really loved the kind of uh it was edgy music of the 80s, new wave music. I
Okay.
love it. Yeah.
And today, if you're typically you put music on, maybe when you're working or doing something, is it classical? Is it what kind of what do you put on?
I really love the group Thievery Corporation. It's a DJ group. They layer sound. It's sort of like
Mhm.
a Latin based um electronic music,
Mhm. Okay.
loungy music. I listen to a lot of that. I listen to tiki bar music in my
Okay.
house, like
Cool.
Hawaiian mid-century
Yeah.
rock music. I love that.
Right
And
on.
when I'm writing, it has to be something without words or words I can't understand at all.
Yeah.
So Thievery Corporation I like, or like the Gotan Project, I like them a lot.
Okay.
Um, and I also love Steely Dan.
Yeah.
Lately, listen to Steely Dan a lot, and Van Morrison. I've been trying to move through a bunch of his albums.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. I think I know the answer to this question, but if not poetry, what?
What do you mean?
What would you do? What would you be if you couldn't be a poet?
But you know the answer to the question, and I have to come up with an answer. I don't even know the answer to that question. Oh,
Well,
I know.
I
I
thought
know.
you'd say a teacher.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I mean, it's my work, right? It's what I've
Yeah.
done, and I've loved
Yeah.
doing it all these years. I think I would be a builder. I'd be a woodworker.
Nice.
I
Okay.
really like I really like working with wood, and I've built how one and a half houses, and I really like that work.
Has that creeped into your poetry at all?
I guess probably in the way that I like to assemble things. I often think about like I like to bang one idea against another. I think maybe and then how can I hold it up? Like I think a lot about structures.
So I just thought of Seamus Heaney's poem "Digging" and the way he uses the pen. You maybe
Yeah,
it might be a little too obvious, but maybe you could do something there with a hammer. Um,
I did
oh,
have a hammer in that poem I just read.
that's true. That's right.
Yeah,
What do you like most about living in Vermont?
the scale of it. People know each other. People are responsible to their community. People recognize each other. I can't go somewhere without knowing somebody. Even though now I live in the big city, you know, half of the population lives in the county I live in now. There's only, I think, six or 700,000 people in the whole state, and half of them are in my region up here. Um, I think that's the thing, and it's beautiful. I
Yeah.
think that goes without saying. It's beautiful, and I find the landscape is very compelling. I love the rural drives. But I lived on an organic farm, a 200-acre farm for 20 years with my in my first family here. Um, and so I've lived in walkable villages and the state capital, and now up here. And every iteration of Vermont is a place where people can know each other
What
and
do you
rely on each other because it's so cold. You have to rely on each other.
what do you like least about living in Vermont?
The how white the state is.
Yeah.
And it's problematic.
And speaking of that, we don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but do you want to say anything about the election, the recent election?
I'm heartbroken.
Do you-
I'm
I
desperate.
heard today that he wants to completely eliminate the Federal Department of Education.
Yeah. What a strange idea.
Yeah,
I I feel like I'm reading a bad book every day. And I feel this strange, like, what's next? Curiosity about it, but deep terror. Deep, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
The two things that well, there's so many things that bother me about it, but one thing is that it's not even about politics anymore.
Mm-mm. No,
It's not about politics.
no,
I miss the days of Reagan and Bush and the Bushes, and I would thought I'd never say that, but it was about politics then, and
yeah.
it's not now. And the other thing is we cannot agree on facts anymore.
That is the most peculiar thing to me that and that people don't care about
Right.
that. An
Right.
enormous chunk of the population just discounted that. Like it just doesn't matter. We're just going to make up new facts. And I think and poets don't always deal in facts. We deal in imagination, right? But it comes out of truth. I think poems are a kind of truth. They are truth with a capital T. They are someone's lived truth in the world. So imagination can be true, but yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah. It's frightening.
Yes.
What what might surprise people about you? And I'm not asking you to share anything that you don't want to share here, obviously, but if people who sort of know you and they find something out about you and say, really, that surprises me about Karen.
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay, that's all right.
Um, ah, I was in a synchronized swimming team when I was a kid.
No kidding.
Yes, that is weird and interesting, maybe.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. You still swim today?
No, not really.
No.
I mean, I
Okay.
can. I like to swim, but there aren't that many pools up here.
Other than Neil Diamond, do you have any guilty pleasures?
Guilty pleasures. What are my guilty pleasures? Oh, yes, I know I do.
Well, we all do.
Oh, swashbuckling TV shows.
Ah, really?
Yeah, like swords fighting, Vikings, you know, stuff like that.
That's surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, that is maybe surprising. I just finished watching the show Black Sails about pirates, and it was incredible. I loved it.
Okay.
Unabashedly, I love that kind of stuff.
Okay. A question that I used to always end these with, and I haven't done it in the last, I don't know how many episodes, but I want to do it with you. And actually, I want to end with you reading a poem of your choice. But before you do that, I want to ask you this big question uh, about our mortality and how much you think about it. And I turned 68 this year, and it's really becoming a reality, right? When I was young, 50 was old, and I got to be 50, and it didn't seem so old. And then I got to be 60, and it didn't seem so old. It's like, okay, I'm getting up there, but 70, I'm approaching 70. You can't. There's no escaping 70. You can't
Yeah.
argue that one away, right? Um, even if it is the new 60 or whatever. And so I always have thought about our mortality and what happens when we die and these issues my whole life, but it's becoming more and more of a reality. So it always interests me to see what people how they think about that, and whether you want to however you want to take that question, whether you want to say what you think happens when we die, or do you think about it much, or do you have anything to say about it?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I'm in a transition point in my life where I'm getting ready to retire from my career and my work, and thinking about, there's this exciting moment where I feel like, well, what's next? And so I feel like I've got this new beginning that I'm on the brink of, and I can just write all the time, or I can do this, or I can do that, or maybe I'll go do something. I don't even know what I'll do. Like maybe I'll go live somewhere else. Maybe I'll whatever. So I feel this incredible amount of possibility because I'm at this juncture. But I also know it's like it feels like my last first start, and like
Mm.
um
Well, there's a great title for a poem, My Last First Start.
first start. Yeah. And I don't believe that I go anywhere when
Consider
I
that stolen, by the way.
okay, good. You can have that. As long as you say something nice about me in your liner notes. Um, I don't think I go anywhere when I die. I don't think that I go to a heaven or anything like that. I think I just get to be dead. Like I think I just get to be a dead person. And what does that mean? I don't know. But when I think about that, um, I get so suddenly sad that I have to stop thinking about it. But I also know it's real.
Mhm.
And so I think I write as a way to stave that stuff off and to try to measure. I think lately more and more I'm writing more about Neanderthals because I mean it sounds like it's funny, right? Like, oh, a weird poet writing about Neanderthals, but they're an ancient self.
Mhm.
I have a line of people that is them, that they had my DNA. Like those people I come from them
Yeah.
and they're gone. And we can barely find the shards of them on the planet now. We get so excited when we find a molar. And that's a gift too, to have been a part of this enormous story, like to have been a piece of it, and that I have children that are going to continue that thread, to be remembered. That's part of what we do when we write is we hope to be remembered. And it's a gift as a musician, a songwriter, and as a writer to know that you leave something. There's a record of your thoughts. So I think about it a lot, actually. I'm 58 and I'm just moving into what does it mean to be not 40 anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good answer. Well, hey, listen,
Topic. Thanks.
I really appreciate you doing this. I'm going to put pressure on you one more time to choose a poem
Yeah.
to take us out
Okay.
with. And again, I will put links in the show notes and encourage people to go find you and buy this book. And I know you have at least one other book available, and then one that's maybe kind of hard to find. Um,
This is
I
my
have,
first book.
yeah, I have that one on order, and I was upset that it didn't come before this interview. That one, is that easy to find? Can we get that
No,
through?
it's out of print. It's
Yeah, that's
only
what
available
I thought.
on as an ebook.
Okay. But then of course there is this and lovely picture, by the way,
Thank
and
you.
uh, and also a new book coming. So
Yeah, thank you.
Karen, take us out with a poem, if you will.
Okay, am I allowed to swear?
Of course.
Okay, just checking. So I'm going to read a poem. I'm going to go out on a note of humor. I was just going to read a poem about imagining being dead, but I think I'll go with something maybe a little. We'll go out on a lighter note. This is oh, can I do I have like a minute to say something before?
Of course.
Okay.
Whatever you'd like.
Okay. My first two books were written with this notion that poetry should serve some kind of a function. It should do some kind of service in society. My first book is about being divorced and sort of how do you find your life again after that. And then my second book, of course, is about my brother. My brother overdosed, and the book is about Ireland, but it's also about losing him. And I realized that a part of me, I don't know if it's gendered in any way, like if it's because I'm a woman writer, that I feel like I've got to use poetry to take care of people. And I've decided I've lost my patience with that. And I don't want to have I just want to have an idea and just get to write about it. And just, and as my friend, a good friend of mine said, well, men do that all the time. So I decided I would consider my ideas as sufficient fodder for poetry. So this is also a poem about, I think I get more and more I think my ideas of myself as a woman shift as I get older, and I feel a different sense of power being older, and I enjoy that. So this poem is called Shit I Can Do Now That I'm Invisible. There's this whole idea that as we come into middle age, we're not supposed to be seen in society in the same way, and people like can knock you out of the way at the produce section. So this is Shit I Can Do Now That I'm Invisible. I take boxes of Cheez-Its off the shelf and just start eating them. Knock more boxes to the floor and keep walking, workers outraged. What the? Who did that? I put my mouth to the kombucha tap next to the checkout lines at Market 32 and hit the handle and drink. I cut in lines at stores, at airports. I stow away on planes, find a seat and don't ask for anything, snooze before liftoff. I nap in exam rooms and hospitals, jaywalk in cities, take what I want in malls, wag my titties around, no problem. I email my grievances, forget the compliment sandwich, let it rip like I fart in company, everyone looking at everyone else. You all can hide behind your potted plants, but I can hide in plain sight. That shit you say that I hear, I carry it back to its source. I tell on you, and people hear me on the wind. I sit on my ass and laugh now, nobody chasing it anymore. Nobody making me feel like walking quicker to my car. Nobody making those tiger pit eyes at me like they mean I'm something good, not knowing I'll plaster them across the World Wide Web, stretched like an elastic waistband across my big, fat belly. I'm headed to a city near you, taking up more and more room, working my way toward orca glory, the only other mammal that goes through menopause, soundlessly, teeth flashing like ice picks out at sea.
Love it. Yeah, I have read that poem. It's wonderful. And who hasn't thought about what you would do if you were invisible, right? But
And just thinking of it as a moment of power rather than a moment of having been lost.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Kerrin McCadden, thank you so much for taking the
Thank
time to
you.
connect. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I'm enjoying your poetry. Look forward to the new book.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and the invitation. Take good care.
You too. Bye-bye.